There is an obsession among modern gamers with the meta or metagame that permeates a lot of the culture surrounding competitive gaming and multiplayer games. Players are constantly fixated on knowing and understanding the meta, and often in team-focused games, going against the meta can even be a serious source of contention with other players. Personally, I think most gamers are more concerned with the metagame than they need to be, and I don't think such an obsession is healthy either for them or for the game they're playing. Hi everyone, my name is Oxy, and in this video we'll talk about the problems with meta, how to improve without conforming to the meta, and how to discuss balance and provide feedback for game developers. First though, we need to establish what exactly a meta is. In the context of gaming, my own definition of a meta is that it is the set of perceived optimal playstyles and interactions to win, as dictated by a community consensus. Which is a lot of big words and may not help you understand me very well, so let me give you an example. Let's take a look at Overwatch. Imagine you're defending point A on Temple of Anubis as a Widowmaker. Your primary decision in setting up your defense is deciding where to stand to set up your sightlines. A common Widowmaker spot is right on the ledge overlooking the point with a clear line of sight to the choke. This spot then can be considered a meta spot for Widowmakers. There's no law within the game that says a Widowmaker must stand there when defending point A, but most players will probably stand there, or at least have used that location before when defending the point as a Widow. Now this applies to basically every decision a player can make within a game, from hero or weapon selection all the way up to overarching strategy and goals for a match. This is why, in games like Overwatch, you will see certain heroes defined as meta or not meta, denoting whether a certain hero is perceived as generally more effective depending on the circumstance. The same applies to a game like Fortnite, where certain guns, like a SCAR or a shotgun, may be considered more meta than others, like an SMG or C4. So why do I think pursuing the meta is bad? Well, first off, I want to clarify that I do not think that searching for optimal strategies is a bad aim. Quite the contrary, in fact. I think that seeking to play the game to the best of your ability is an important aim, and should be one of your primary goals when playing a game, second only to having fun while you play. However, adhering to the meta and pursuing the optimal strategy aren't actually the same things, and a lot of time, they can be at odds with one another. For one, most players don't derive their knowledge of the meta entirely from first-hand experience. They play the game, seek to learn more about it, and take information from sources like YouTubers and forum posts and use it to frame their understanding of the game. Again, this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's important to understand a game as accurately as possible before developing your strategy for it, and turning to people who have played longer and have a stronger grasp of the mechanics is a perfectly advisable thing to do. But players should not take any of the information they gain at face value. You need to temper this advice by testing it through your own experimentation. For example, if someone makes a case that burst rifles in Fortnite are better than assault rifles because they can potentially one-tap on a burst, you need to first try that out in a game to see how feasible that is as a strategy, because often game mechanics translate very differently from paper to live gameplay. And second, if you determine that such a case is in fact valid, then you need to decide if such a strategy is actually useful to you. I mean, what's your playstyle? Are you taking a lot of mid to long range fights where a burst will shine? Or are you more prone to sneaking up on someone and getting into a shotgun build fight, where an AR or even an SMG might be more useful? What I'm trying to stress here is the importance of critical thinking. Accepting somebody else's interpretation of the metagame, even if it's very accurate, is not a good practice, because even if that person is correct, you still haven't learned how to think for yourself and make your own deductions about what the optimal choices to make within the game are. If the meta changes, or you move to another game, you still haven't developed the ability to think for yourself without relying on somebody else to help formulate your ideas. And again, I'm not saying that people that do analyze the game and present their findings are not valuable. I mean, my own channel is built on just that kind of content. But I don't want any of you guys blindly accepting what I say as gospel truth. If I make a statement about whether or not something is good or optimal in the game, go and try it out and decide for yourselves whether you agree or not. And if you don't, come back and tell me why, and then we can have a discussion about it. The other reason it's not good to simply adhere to someone's definition of the meta is because there's a very good chance they are wrong, at least partly. Especially when it comes to discussion about game balance and what should change to make the game better, arguments based on the game's meta are very shaky things to build your views upon. For one, it's incredibly arrogant of a player to do so. You're essentially saying, I understand the game so well that I know it better than the developers and I know what's right for the game, and if the developers would just listen to me and implement my ideas, the game would be better for everyone else. Not only is this obviously misguided, but it also misses the fact that as a player, you are claiming to know not only what is best for you, but what is best for the rest of the player base, many of which likely have very different preferences from you. Now to clarify, I'm not saying that you shouldn't make observations about the state or operation of mechanics within the game, but to make an argument based only on an observation of a game's meta, such as shotguns are used too frequently, therefore shotguns are clearly overpowered, is not only misplaced, it's just plain foolish. After all, the whole point of a meta is that it's based on player perception, and player perception is very often wrong. Epic Games demonstrated this recently with their changes to shotgun rarity. They increased the rarity of pumps from gray and green to green and blue, and decreased the rarity of tactical shotguns, which spanned from green to purple, down to a range spanning from gray to blue. Nothing about the actual performance of the weapons was changed. No damage numbers or fire rates were tweaked, no drop chances were adjusted, everything about the weapons was exactly the same except the color. And yet Epic saw a difference in the equip rate of shotguns following this change, as people started picking up the higher colored pumps more favorably over the now lower colored tactical shotguns. The point I'm trying to make here is that a vast majority of the player base did not do their homework. My own behavior, as far as I can tell, was not affected by this change. I already prioritized running a pump shotgun over a tactical shotgun at any rarity, except when running solo or duo squads and running to run a single shotty, where I would then prefer the tac for the higher fire rate against multiple opponents. But for many people, their perception of what was good or meta was flawed, because they didn't properly understand what the weapons did. Finally, I want to point out the fact that meta matters far less for a majority of players than most people realize. The average player of any game, by definition of being average, is not the best at the game. This means that at any given point, this average player probably has any number of ways in which he can improve at the game. As a result, it's not necessary for him to be using the best weapon or character in order to succeed. One of my favorite examples of this is Daequan's SMG video. In it, Daequan stomps an entire Fortnite lobby using nothing but the gray SMG. This demonstrates that in an average Fortnite lobby, it's possible to win using a non-meta, in other words not optimal, weapon. Now some of you are probably saying, but Oxy, Daequan is a pro level player, and he was going up against average level players in that lobby. They weren't at his skill level. If he was going against another pro, he wouldn't be able to win using just a gray SMG. And that's entirely my point. Yes, the meta matters, but it usually only matters at the top end of the skill charts. When player skill is equalized, then additional factors like power of your weapons starts to really matter. But for the average player who still has lots of room to improve, it is far more productive to focus on your own improvement in the game than on trying to fill into a perceived model of what is optimal to do within the game. In other words, you don't have to follow the meta to win a vast majority of the time, you just have to get better. And that should already be your goal anyway. If you're investing time into a game, even casually, getting better at it should be one of your primary goals after enjoying your time in the game. And speaking of which, it is usually more valuable to improve than it is to win. It's no accident that "learn from your mistakes" is a common phrase to help people get better. It's not just that finding something to learn from a mistake is a positive way of spinning a negative experience, but that mistakes generally offer the greatest opportunity for improvement. You can learn from a win, but you generally don't learn as much as when you lose. Because when you win, you didn't get challenged enough to the point where you break. And your wins are a result of your improvement, not the other way around. Winning isn't a requirement to improvement. Improvement is a requirement to winning. You should focus more on growth, and winning will follow naturally. So how should a player behave in order to experience growth if following the meta isn't the way? Well, seek to develop your own understanding of the game through personal experience and experimentation as much as possible. Acknowledge that you do not and probably never will understand the game fully. There's always more to learn. Be humble in your victories and see your mistakes as the most valuable opportunities you have to improve. Now, if you're providing feedback for developers or discussing other ways to balance the game, do not focus on outlining suggestions to implement. Suggestions are generally poor feedback for a developer because they do not leave the problem open-ended for the dev to solve as they wish. You may think your solution is obvious and ideal, but chances are not everyone will agree with you. And there's also a pretty good chance you don't understand the problem fully, or aren't recognizing other issues your solution might affect. So how should you give feedback? Focus on outlining your own experience and the problem itself instead of a solution. Instead of saying, shotguns are OP, Epic needs to nerf their damage by at least 10%, Try something like, I don't like how it feels like 90% of fights end in shotgun battles. I wish I could rely on my assault rifle more to end fights in mid-range without having to push every time. The second option is much more open-ended and leaves the developers a lot more room to find the best solution to the problem. So in summary, it's more important to develop the ability to think critically than to train yourself to follow a meta that's determined by consensus or individual players. Focus on your own self-improvement and look at mistakes as opportunities for growth instead of negative setbacks. If you're going to provide feedback for the devs or discuss balance with others online, frame your feedback by focusing on your experience and the problem itself rather than posing your own suggestions so that the devs have room to do their job. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this type of broader, mindset-focused guide, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you enjoy my videos and don't want to miss any of them, be sure to trigger the bell so you'll receive notifications. I hate to have to mention this, but YouTube has changed the way subscription boxes work, and you're not guaranteed to see videos from anybody you've subscribed to unless you do this. So if you want to support any of your favorite YouTubers, that's one of the easiest ways to do so. Once again, my name is Oxy, and I'll see you guys in the next one.